Hello and welcome back to another video in the world of Monster Hunter. Today we have two builds for you. This is the normal burst and the poison burst. So we're continuing on with the Gunlance theme as was requested by Brink. A lovely guy. There is a link in the description below. Please feel free to check him out. Anyway, on with the escapades. We're going to be starting off with normal burst. And shock horror, it's a normal level 4 Gunlance. So for the first one, pray to RN Jesus because you're going to need the Taroth Buster Sleep, whack an Elementless Jewel in there and a Health Augment. We're going to be using the Dragon King Alpha Helm with a Sharp decoration, the Cool Taroth Alpha with an artillery decoration, the Draken Alpha with a magazine and critical decoration, the Empress Beta Waist with another tenderizer because we need those things, and Mighty Death Stench Beta Boots with 2 artillery and the Mighty Charm. In total, this will drop your overall affinity from the current meta, which is about 90%, and I've got it to about 86 because the meta uses an affinity augment in the weapon, so I've had to try and find a way around that to fit in the comfortability of a health augment because we're not all pros. So these are for the people looking at pro and going, I'd like to do that, but I've got to get good first. So don't worry, I'm in that boat as well. And we have 402 effective raw. So it still does a nice chunk of damage. Now, as with always with all of my builds, I try not to discern or differentiate too much from the meta. I try and find ways of just dropping the overall output just a little bit, just so that we can get a little bit of comfortability in, such as health augments or a few quality of life skills. So if you actually manage to go through the meta site and look at the overall build for the meta Taroth Buster Sleep, you will notice that it has a 90% affinity, and after you've basically just whittled it down to your standard normal buffs of what you would carry on you, such as your attack talon and attack sack or whatever it's called, your charms, you will have, before any external food buffs or mega demon drugs, essentially roughly about 402 effective raw. And what a coincidence, because this build has 402 effective raw. So quite simply, all I have dropped in place of trying to get a health augment is literally 4% affinity, which I honestly do not feel is too bad, particularly for someone like me who's still really trying to get into the Gunlance. I've had a fair bit of practice with them, I understand them. I'm just not as comfortable with a Gunlance as I am with a heavy bowgun. Once I get to that stage, perhaps I will start going for a bit more of the affinity, because using this build and an affinity augment, I could get to 96% affinity, which would then be a rather stupid amount of damage. But yeah, we won't then go into that, because I think at that point then, considering how the meta is built, I think at that point we could safely say that I beat the meta yet again. Anyway, moving on from my ego, because it's huge. Absolutely loving this build. The hardest thing about this build at the moment is 1, the Draken pieces, and 2, the 3 artillery decorations. Once you've basically got Draken and your 3 artillery decorations, you should pretty much have the rest of this. They are going to be the hardest parts for you to acquire. Overall though, I'm actually really enjoying this build. I still prefer my Wide Gunlance, but this is definitely creeping up behind it. Anyway, on to the next one, and this is a bit of an odd one. Here we are using the Royal Burst, which is lovely. And this weapon is, in certain situations, particularly in monsters that are rather neutral or weak to poison, this is slightly better than sleep, just ever so slightly. So I have a health and affinity augment with an attack decoration, the Kaiser Gamma helmet with sharp and critical, Cool Taroth Alpha chest with artillery, Draken Alpha gloves with magazine and tenderizer, the Draken waist with another attack decoration, and then Dante's boots with 2 artillery. and finally a handicraft 3 charm. Now the reason this is able to creep ahead ever so slightly, despite the fact that it is roughly 7 effective raw lower, is simply because it has 100% affinity, because this is where laws of probability come into account. Just because you have 90% affinity chance doesn't mean that there is very, very unlikely, but there is a chance for you to go an entire hunt and still not hit a single crit. This is just how probability works. The idea of getting a higher affinity chance is to reduce the realm of inconsistency. Unless you have 100%, there's still going to be inconsistency. Plus adding in the simple fact that this weapon does poison, which is damage over time, and against things like Kushala, this weapon in terms of overall output and DPS will beat Taroth Buster Sleep. Unless it is a monster that is really, really resistant to poison, Taroth Buster Sleep in theory should not outdo Royal Burst in terms of damage, even with this build. Now, as with the last of my Gunlance videos, a small tutorial, but again I wish to express there are better people for tutorials. I'm really not good at explaining certain aspects of Monster Hunter. I do know them, I know the math, but if you ask me to explain it to you, I'm going to just trip over my words and be like, ah. So the general gameplay style for a normal Gunlance is, of course, you can play defensively with your shield up and poking where you can, and when you see an opening you go into what is known as the slapstick combo or the swing lance combo, which is basically what you've near enough seen me do the whole way through this entire fight. And when the lance hits the ground at the pinnacle of the second attack, you do your alternate attack or your shelling, and you will release all of your shells, which in this case, because I have magazine, will be 6 shells. So up, down, burst, cross swing, holding control and right click does the quick reload, and if you just press left click again you go straight back into the combo, or you can press spacebar to reposition. I'm not too sure on what the controls would be for console. Anyway, that is me. Thank you very much. I hope to see you guys pretty darn soon. Good luck, have fun, and don't die. It's bad for the health.